watching a scene from last night in Ferguson, Missouri, a half-mile stretch of road that is being literally viewed by people around the world to see what will happen next after the shooting of a young man here by a police officer. So last night, another attempt at peaceful demonstration thwarted. The question is why? Was it about police? Was it about a group of instigators doing this, all surrounding, again, the shooting of Michael Brown? Now, Missouri Highway Police Captain Ron Johnson, he has been put as the commander of this situation. He says much of the violence came not from protesters, but from, again, these instigators. He called them troublemakers who have infiltrated the crowd, possibly from out of town. We have Chris King here. He's the editorial director of the St. Louis American newspaper. He works this community. He knows it very well. Chris, thank you for joining us. First, the immediate. Last night, the tear gas came out. We see what happens on camera. We do not see what happens collaterally off camera. People are suffering from the tear gassing and the disruption here in general. True?
Most immediately, the Canfield Green Apartments is where this movement started, and those folks are suffering. I was hearing from people last night, couldn't get their children to bed, loud, suffering from the tear gas. But also in the neighborhood, our staff at the St. Louis American live here, and they have tear gas on their front porches. You know, it's a problem, the effects of this.
Now, the question is what makes it stop. From afar, there seems to be a vacuum of leadership. Yes, you do have Captain Johnson, who was appointed from the highway police side, but the local leaders, your politicians, there doesn't seem to be the infrastructure of response from leadership here. Is that what the community feels?
St. Louis has lacked for leadership across the board, and certainly not only in the black community. The corporate leadership in St. Louis should be doing something. They should be doing much more to knock some heads, and this is bad for our region, and the economic leadership knows this. What are they doing? I don't see them doing anything.
Now becomes the big question. This is the fault of the police. They're militarized. They're scaring us. That was the early take. Then it was, no, you're not here to protest. You guys are here to start violence, and that's what's wrong with this community in the first place. Those were the battle lines. You're saying there is a third answer here that you believe is closest to the truth. That you say you have information that there are instigators, is the word you use, coming into the community and trying to start trouble and ruining these protests. Yes?
Yes. I mean, the militarized police tactics are partly a response to it. The first conflagration came from a Molotov cocktail. Those were never in Canfield Green until now.
Did you came here, you live here, you've never seen that?
Never. It came from Chicago, a communist group from Chicago. They came into the Canfield Green Apartments. They showed the kids how to make them, and they're still here. But they're not going to be here long. We're going to run them out.
Now, is this what you're told, or do you know it?
I know it. Have a photojournalist that embedded with them, and many eyewitness residents in the community. One of them said to the governor of Missouri that to fix the problem, he didn't do anything, but the community, the citizens are going to run them out.
Now, the translation of that becomes what we see on camera. I don't see white communist types getting arrested. I see who seem to be African-American locals. What are you saying? They're training them up?
Well, they were arrested. There are pictures of arrests.
All right, good.
And we're working on it. They're going to be run out.
All right, and when you say run out, what do you mean? Because the last thing we want is things done the wrong way.
No vigilante justice. No vigilante justice. We'll make sure they're not here, though.
By how? You're going to expose them, put things online, let media like us know so that we can tell the truth of what's happening?
We're working on it.
All right. I get that you're being secretive because you have your own process, but remember, what matters here most is stability right now. This is a very small place we're talking about here, but it's having very big reverberations because of the issues involved. And that takes us to the last point here. The community says it wants justice, all right? The question becomes, what will justice mean? You have the St. Louis Dispatch saying they may have as many as a dozen eyewitnesses who will back up what the officer says happened that night. The autopsy, as you know, had somewhat of a revelation. The thought had been this was done from behind. The kids were running away and they got shot. The autopsy may suggest otherwise. What happens here if the officer winds up having had a justified shooting?
Well, first, the county prosecutor's manipulating this process.
How so?
All of this information should have come out all at once as a group. By leaking it out in pieces, he's encouraging this kind of speculation and dragging it out. The innocence or guilt of Officer Wilson, and he is innocent until proven guilty, is one matter. We want justice in the case of Michael Brown. But the police, the Ferguson police in that unit, when he was killed, they stood around that man for 4 hours while the community howled in pain and grief. That was torture on the community. And those are torture tactics and intimidation tactics that are common in Ferguson, in St. Louis County, and St. Louis City, and that ultimately is what we're going to stop through this movement.
So you're saying you're looking at the micro and the macro. What happened to Michael Brown is horrible. Any way you look at it has to be investigated and fully understood. But you're saying that it tapped into other issues that this community is living with for a long time, and that's just as big a problem. That's not going away no matter what this situation resolves?
The St. Louis American, our newspaper, we're in it for the long run. We're going to stop intimidation tactics in the black community by police in the St. Louis region. It's going to end with this movement.
Do you see, hopefully tonight, it's too early to know now, but when we're there tonight, hopefully we see more of these community organizers, more people coming out trying to control what it is so we can separate the instigators from the people who just want progress?
Antonio, friends and others have been asking for more men, black men would be most helpful to stay later and help cool down these young heads. The instigators, we're gonna get them run out, and the economic leadership needs to pressure the police to slow down on the Gestapo tactics, and above all, quit gassing residents. Tear gas has been shot into the backyards of residents. There are videos of this. That's not acceptable. Captain Ron Johnson should not accept any gassing of residents in the neighborhood, or peaceful protesters, but especially the collateral damage of residents is shameful and must stop.
But you know how quickly it gets confused and chaotic, and then the response is just general, not as targeted as possibly it could be. But Chris, this is an ongoing conversation. Let's see what happens tonight. Let's hope we have less to talk about of this type of gassing and reaction tomorrow than we did after what happened last night. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Let's take instigators, or whatever you want to call them, took over. Those opened fire on police, leaving 2 protesters wounded. More than 30 arrests were made after that. Stun grenades, tear gas also used. Several members of our CNN crew caught in the thick of the madness, including our correspondent Ed Lavendera and producer Steve Castenbaum. They're with us now. Guys, so you were in the middle of it last night. A lot of this footage is your own. In your opinion, Ed, what went wrong?
I just think that they're trying to control these more militant elements of the scene here, and that is just something that the authorities here haven't been able to figure out how to do that.
Why not?
And I just think there are a couple of moments that just stood out to me from last night. We had religious leaders out there, community leaders that had a little bit more street cred, if you will, right? And even those guys couldn't get through. And you could see them, they were up in their faces like, if you do this, don't do this. I mean, it was tense.
Obstinate youth, or Steve, do you buy into the instigator theory that maybe these guys are out-of-towners, or maybe they're people who are being told things, and whipped up before they get there at night? What do you think?
There definitely are out-of-towners here. Last night, I saw the T-shirts from several organizations that I've recognized from when I covered Occupy Wall Street, for instance, and other demonstrations, not just Occupy. I'm not meaning to single that out, but we definitely saw people there last night who were intent on being defiant, going head-to-head with police, and, like Ed said, refusing to listen to the community leaders who were telling them not to do this. At the same time, night after night after night, we've heard the gunshots. There are people in this crowd who are here to do more than just protest, who come here armed, and they're a very small number. The police have talked to us about this. They showed us the guns tonight that they confiscated, and we heard the gunshots while we were up there.
You saw somebody lighting a fire also, right?
Yes, we did see during that really tense standoff with police up right around where Michael Brown was shot. The tear gas canisters were going off, flash grenades were going off, and right around then, we saw somebody, an individual, try to light a building on fire while we were up there. And this is a small number of people compared to the hundreds of people that came out yesterday and were protesting, marching up and down peacefully.
Ed, is it the same themes that are bringing people out? Are they feeding off the information that's coming out about the investigation, or are these long-held feelings that are just bubbling over because of what happened with Michael Brown?
I think you get a little bit of both. That the Michael Brown is what has that's the case, but their bigger point is what you're talking about.
An arrest of the officer, does that make this go away?
I from the sense that I get, I think anything short of a conviction is going to be tough to swallow for a lot of those people. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. Obviously, this process needs to play out, but I don't sense a lot of patience. You hear repeatedly a lot of people wondering why he hasn't even been indicted yet. In this case, hasn't even gone to a grand jury as far as we know.
Well, they may have one in panel, maybe take a look. You can arrest without indictment, as we all know. That investigation, of course, being parallel with just this overall social condition. There's been a lot of talk about the militarization of the police and heavy-handed tactics. But Steve, you did Occupy Wall Street, so did I, and we've seen so many bad situations around the world. This is only a half-mile street, as you guys laid out the area to me. Is there an argument to be made that there's tolerance by the authorities here, because they could overcome this area very quickly and suppress this number of people very quickly if they wanted to? Is there a little bit more tolerance night after night by the authorities?
I think we saw more restraint from the police department last night than we had seen previous nights. They stood their ground, they formed their lines, and then they didn't move in on the crowd. On the previous nights, we saw them, within a short period of time, move in on the crowd after they did not obey the order to disperse. Last night, the order came multiple times, and yet they did not move in. When they saw somebody throw a bottle at the police, out of the crowd, a bad actor, as police have been calling them, you saw the riot police pointing. They identified the person in the crowd, then a small team would emerge from the larger...
Did a specific targeted removal of that person.
Exactly.
Let me also say, too, because what I saw from the authorities, what I've heard from several of the police on the ground, when you ask them about why are they going there, or they're being asked, not us asking, why are you coming in here with the tanks and that sort of thing? Because they have to disperse into these neighborhoods and find the people who are firing off the shots. I hear repeatedly from the officers out there that you can't send a patrol car in there. The bullets will fly right through the door, so you can't send a patrol officer in there. You need that heavier equipment. Now, it's up to other people to debate whether or not that's right or wrong. I'm letting you know what these officers are saying.
Right.
They bring in those tanks, you have an officer up high, they're able to see above the crowd. That makes them feel a lot more secure.
So Captain Johnson last night, as you guys said, more emotional than we've seen him in the past. He's worried about the kids in those houses, and the drive-by shootings, and doing whatever he can to stop the violence. Hopefully tonight gets better. Guys like you, Steve, and Ed, putting yourself in harm's way. But without you, we wouldn't know about this instigator group. We wouldn't know about this component. It would look like it's just cops versus locals. So thank you for the reporting, and thanks for being here. Thank you. I'll be with you tonight. The show was very good. Coming up on News.